If you've been here over the last few weeks, you may know that we've been working through a series looking at the I am statements of Jesus in the Gospel of John. So I was about to recount them, but I'm definitely not going to remember all seven. We've been making our way through those. And today we get to look at Jesus saying, I am the door, which is in John 10, 1 to 10. So we're going to start by looking at the Bible together. It will come up on the screen. It's on the app, if you have the app. Or if you're here and you don't own a real life Bible, there are some on the sides and we'd love you to help yourself to one. Take it home. So John 10, starting at verse 1, says this. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the door, sometimes says the gate, for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the door of the sheep. These are Jesus's words, and he's speaking to the Pharisees who, in this story and in the gospel, are considered as one with the Jews. And as a bit of context, if you want to read back, there is this beautiful story in John 9 where a man who is born blind, Jesus comes across him, and his blindness, because of the time that it was and the cultural context at that moment, meant that this man who was blind would have been excluded. He wouldn't have been allowed into the synagogues. He would have had no access. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, prominent people in society at that time, would not have welcomed him in. And there is this moment where Jesus puts mud on his eyes and the man is healed from his blindness. And the Pharisees are outraged. There's division, there's curiosity. And in that moment, Jesus chooses to correct the Pharisees' attitude and to redefine the kingdom of God. So it's really controversial. He's just healed this man. The Pharisees are outraged. And that's when Jesus speaks. He says, truly, truly, I tell you, I am the door of the sheep. And so although what he's doing in this moment is trying to teach the Pharisees a lesson about who he is, more than anything, it reveals something of the character of Jesus to us. It reveals who he is, who we are. And I think there are a couple of things that God kind of promises to us in this passage that we're going to work through together this morning. Is that okay? Great. So the first is access. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. I wonder if you've ever felt on the outside of something. I moved to Manchester a year ago, last August, and I live in Ancoats over near Cuttingham Square, which happens to be the place where loads of the running clubs meet. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Manchester is like fully in its running club era. You cannot walk anywhere without getting like knocked over by people who are running. But it's not just people who are running in a normal way. They're like gazelles. They literally just like float through the city. And I had a Saturday morning once where I was sat in a coffee shop, not running, and this group of about 100 people met. They were the gazelle-looking type. They'd been for a run. And I was just so curious. I was like, what is this thing? Like, I want to be in that. The issue is that I just can't run at all. So I followed them on Instagram, and then I like hung back for a bit with vague hopes of one day being good enough at not just running, but being able to chat while you're running. And I kind of hung back and thought maybe one day I'll join them, but we'll see. Until they announced their Christmas social, which was a pub quiz and like a 3-course Christmas dinner. And so I text Molly, who's up for anything, and I knew she'd be the one person who would think it wasn't that rogue. And we signed up to go to the Snappy Runners Christmas social, having literally never been for a run with them before or since. I am now in 2 group chats that are called Snappy Runners. I've still never been, but I'm just I'm kind of like half in the run club, but I definitely snuck in the back door. So you can call me a thief or a robber. But I had to find a way to get in, and I could not go in the conventional way. In this I am statement of Jesus saying that he's the door, he's telling us what is open and what's closed. And you could read this narrative and focus on the idea of who's in and who's out in God's flock. It could become quite exclusive and cozy. But what we find is this invitation in the passage that actually reaches beyond any of the limitations that we may put on it. It's tempting, isn't it, to read this passage and to just assume that we're the insiders, to think like, oh, it's really sad for everyone else, but I'm in this place of complacency and privilege, and I'm definitely like snug in the sheepfold. Maybe you feel like you've earned it through your hard work, and maybe you feel like you're pretty good at the religion stuff. Maybe you think that you're immune to the dangers that this passage talks about. But it says that whatever you've done, whoever you are, wherever you've been, you can have access to the kingdom of God. You're not on the outside. And that's why I love the story that I spoke about briefly before in John 9. That's why I think this sets this up well. Because Jesus has this encounter with a man who would have been very much on the wrong side of a closed door. And Jesus opens the door of the kingdom to him. So if you feel like you're on the outside, Jesus will draw you in. Your role isn't just to observe the people, but it's to take part in it, to have access to God and his kingdom. And maybe you know that, but there's just something deep down in you that feels a bit unsettled, or like you are on the outside. And John Tyson, who's an American pastor, he calls this a glory deficit. He says that we all have this. We live in this chasm between the things that our human heart longs for and the things that we're actually able to acquire or achieve through our own strength or charisma or talents or skill. Maybe in your life there's evidence of a belonging deficit, a significance deficit, an affirmation deficit. We all long to be accepted and on the inside. And I know that sometimes in my life, I can look for shortcuts to those things. I can seek those things from other people. I can seek those things from myself and my own efforts. I can seek it from the way that other people speak or act towards me. But in this passage, Jesus tells us that he is the door, that he is the only way, not a door, he is the door. And there aren't any shortcuts that anyone can take to being in his kingdom except to be in relationship with him. You have access to the kingdom of God through Jesus. You don't have to sneak in or be someone you're not or go round the back door. All you have to do is enter. And I think what we find here is an invitation to make our lives all about Jesus. However you want to phrase it, maybe you like to think of it as seeking him first or putting him at the center, or focus on him. But the invitation is to make your life about Jesus. You can't find a quicker way. You can't shortcut around it. But you all have access to the kingdom of God. So the first, access. Secondly, protection. Verse 9 says, I am the door. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They'll come in and go out and they will find pasture. I think we have a picture to show, if it's helpful, of what a sheep pen would have looked like in this time. So it's like lots of boulders stacked on top of each other. And this is what the sheep pen would have looked like. And you'll notice there's like an opening so people can go in. Sheep is definitely sheep going into that. Sheep can come in and go out. And typically what would happen is during the day, the shepherds would lead the sheep out for provision. They'd go out to get their food and then they would come back in the nighttime for safety. And I like the idea of this as a safe space. But if you plopped me in the middle and left me there for focus, I wouldn't be that happy because it just doesn't look that secure. There's no roof, there's no door. It looks a bit open and a bit scary. That concerns me and maybe for the sheep. I have no explanation at all for the roof. I don't know why there's not one. I guess wasn't like Manchester weather. But I can tell you a bit about the gate. And what I know is that at this time, it would have been common practice for shepherds to fill that gap with their bodies. So there was no physical opening or closing, but the shepherds would have lay in that gap and they would have physically become the gate themselves. So if something wanted to come close to the sheep, if something wanted to harm the sheep, it would literally have to go through the body of the shepherd first. And to illustrate the safety of this sheep pen, we're given the picture of wolves, which would have been one of the main dangers to the sheep at that time. And we're given this picture of the wolves circling around the outside of the boulders. They would have been able to get really close. They would have been able to make a really loud noise that would go above and beyond and into the pen. They would have been able to threaten and scare the sheep, but they would not have been able to actually cause any harm or get in without going through the shepherd first. My friend was telling me a story the other day, just your average Wednesday. She was at home doing some gardening with her husband. So she had got a bit sweaty and hot and frustrated, and they were getting wound up. So he sent her and her daughter out for a coffee. And she went up, she ordered her coffee, and in the most outrageous, obvious way, the barista just started flirting with her. And she was like, oh no, my daughter's here, I'm married, what? And just got a bit flustered. Didn't know her daughter being there was not the main problem, just to clarify. She got a bit flustered, got a bit thrown, didn't really know what to say. So she just quickly ordered her flat white and then went and sat down with her daughter. This barista comes to deliver her coffee to her table and carries on his reckless flirting with this woman. And in that moment, I can't even remember what he said. I think it was going in one ear and out of the other, and she was just panicking. But as he was trying all of his best moves on my friend, her daughter, who's 4, just looked at this guy before she could say anything. Her daughter looked at this guy dead in the face and says, "My daddy's at home." He could get close, but he could actually get nowhere because she had a daughter who was fiercely protecting her in that moment. I love how realistic the promise of protection is in this passage. It's not optimistic. It doesn't assume that danger will never come close to us, that we will always have things really easy and safe and calm. It doesn't do that. It acknowledges threat and fear and says that even in the middle of that, you are looked after and cared for by a watchful, attentive, sacrificial Jesus who says, "I am the door of the sheep." And over this season as a church, we've read Psalm 23 a lot together, which holds that. It says, even when we walk through the darkest valley, even when we're most afraid, most broken, that God will be with us. We are safe. And once we accept Jesus as our gate, we are held in his care and his protection. And that can be the thing that keeps us going in good times and in bad. I've been through seasons where that is the thing that's carried me, where I've felt like I've not known what to do. I felt afraid and lonely. And the care of Jesus is the thing that's kept me going. And maybe you're in one of those seasons at the moment. Maybe you feel like you need to know the protection of Jesus, not just day by day, but hour by hour to sustain you and to keep you. Or maybe the challenge is different this morning. Maybe you know that you've become too safe in the pen, and that God is asking you within his protection to go out into a new thing, to follow him into a new place, to have courage and boldness. Whether you're staying in or going out, you can come in and go out and be under the care and protection of Jesus. So access, protection, and finally purpose. The bit we just read, I'm the gate, whoever enters through me will be saved. They'll come in and go out and find pasture. And then verse 10, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. Can I tell you a secret? I have never figured out how to use a baby gate. You know the gates that people have at the top of their stairs when they have little people running around their house? They're meant to stop toddlers falling down the stairs. And I think you're meant to be able to use them in quite a basic way if you're an adult. I have tried countless times to open one of those that I just can't figure it out. And it's not that I'm immune to baby traps. I can get into a bottle of Calpol and I can do the things that adults are meant to do. I don't know why that was my illustration. I can do the things that adults are meant to do. For the life of me, I cannot open a baby gate. And I have had maybe 10 times in my life where I've been at a friend's house, they've got children in their house, I've gone upstairs to use the toilet, and I'm just stumped by the baby gate. And I'll like get my phone out of my pocket, turn the torch on, stand there for a minute. And in the end, every time I give up and just climb over it. And it's not dignified and it's not clever, but I just can't work it out. It's not, it's quite an image, never again. And I never tell anyone because I get too embarrassed. So I just go downstairs and pretend that my trip to the toilet was really normal when I've been like, what's it called? Orienteering around the house. Maybe this is the sort of restrictive door that you think of when you think of Jesus as a door. Most of us, if we're left to ourselves, we think of things that aren't freeing. We think of like bars and locks and alarms and enclosures. But what if Jesus is a different type of door? A door that opens out instead of closing in. A place of release, movement, spaciousness. I love the Message version says, anyone who goes through me will be cared for. They'll freely go in and go out and find pasture. And I love that idea of the freedom of coming in and of going out and Jesus just being there anyway. He doesn't give you access to his kingdom and draw you into relationship with him just so that your life can be maintained. He is the door. And here he's telling us what that door leads to. That the sort of life he has for you is one of rich satisfaction, one of good pasture. He came that you may. You having a full life is not an accidental result or a nice coincidence of Jesus coming. His primary mission is to be the door that you walk through to the fullest type of life that you can live. And Jesus doesn't just save you from something, he saves you for something. And you may have noticed as you walked in through the garage earlier, we have our values as a church painted on the wall down there. And one of them is free. We want to be people who are free. And we often say that we don't just want to be people who are freed from stuff. We don't just want to be freed from guilt or from shame or from addiction. But we want to be freed to something, freed to relationship with him, free to creativity, free to have courage. Jesus' ultimate goal is not just to lead you or to lead you in or out. It's to be in communion with you. It's to be in relationship with you. And sometimes, I know for me, without even noticing, Jesus can just become on the outside of my life. He can become on the outside of my day when I forget to spend time with him. He can become on the outside of my decisions when I ask everybody else for their opinion, but I haven't even asked God what he thinks. Or he can just become on the outside of my heart when I give myself to things or to people and just leave no space for him. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus is saying, I am the door to a different sort of life, to a life that you cannot even imagine, life to the full. And I wonder what you need to ask Jesus to do this morning. Maybe you're making a decision, and when you think about it, actually, he's not been in on that at all. Maybe you feel like you've just got a bit flat and you need him to just come again and fill you up and give you this sense of excitement and purpose for your life. Maybe you're here this morning and you're still just standing in the doorway and you're not really sure whether you want to go through or not. So you're just standing there tentatively. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to pray together. We're going to respond. And it may be that the response is different for each of us. But whatever the challenge is for you this morning, Jesus is the door. This is good news for us and for our lives. He tells us in our lives we can have access to him, we can be protected by him, and we can have purpose.